This is the Aptitude Outdoors podcast, where we interview travelers, explorers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the best tips and stories from around the world. Life is hard, and we're out here doing larger-than-life things, whether it's pushing ourselves physically in the outdoors or mentally at work or in the podcast studio. Absolute Aid is here to help you focus, recover, and stay calm during your most intense moments. Absolute Aid, created by nature, made with science, for those who seek to do more. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. Thanks for tuning back in. Today, we have a very special guest, author, scientist, naturalist, Leigh Calvez. Former Ohio native, I guess. You started your life in Ohio, so that's really interesting because, you know, I am in Ohio right now. I live in Ohio. A lot of my guests are from Ohio, and it's just continually bridging this gap. I feel like everybody in the world is from Ohio, and I don't understand it. So yeah. So Leigh, welcome. And before we get into all of the awesome work you've done in the writing, how did you go from a kid living in Ohio to basically being able to travel all across the world, writing, doing science, all of that awesome stuff that us kids who live in cornfields, like outside my window right here, dream about doing for our whole lives?
Yeah, I feel obligated to do the OH.
There you go. I-O, right here.
Yeah. That was for my dad.
Yeah.
Who is no longer with us, but in spirit, he would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I always wanted to travel. I just in my bones, I guess. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, just wanted to travel. And when my husband at the time got a interview in Boston, I knew there were whales there. And I wanted to see a whale. You know, I spent a lot of weekends watching Jacques Cousteau with my dad and just fascinated by the ocean. And it really was the whales that sort of inspired my life, inspired the natural world in me. And I like to say they were big enough. Like it couldn't have been a bear. It couldn't have been an elephant even. It took a whale the size of, this big creature to really inspire me. And I went on a whale watch, saw my first whale, fell in love, and was determined to study them and find out all I could about them. And yeah, we moved to the Northeast, lived there for a few years, and then he got transferred out to Seattle. And I kept working with whales, went to Hawaii, worked with whales. And then, it just sort of expanded from there. The natural world, the woods, and now I'm really into the woods because I did the whale thing. The ocean is flat. Doesn't look like there's a lot of life there, but there's actually tons of life. Mm-hmm. But I learned about that, and now I'm really into what's in the woods.
Yes, and I love the contrast between the books. I know you've written a lot of books, but the two kind of like easily found mainstream books, you've got the book on owls, you got the book on whales, and it's like such a contrast between the two species because they're like have nothing in common. And owls, the reason I got your book is I have a good friend here. We go out, we do photography all the time, wildlife photography. Ohio is known for having tons of like bird migrations come through here because of the Great Lakes and all that stuff. So I've not gotten a picture of an owl. And they're like, I'm in a photographer's group, and one of the guys, he's done work for like National Geographic, all this stuff. And he's always like looking for owls. And I realized I don't know anything about owls. So I found your book and I was like, I read it. I was like, this is a great book. And so how did you get interested in owls? Because that's such a different thing than whales, like completely different. One's in the ocean, underwater. One's hard to find up in the trees. And they're just like tiny little creatures. So where did the interest come from?
Well, that's interesting. I have given several talks on similarities between whales and owls.
Wow.
There actually are a lot. And that's really interesting because nature loves to use the same thing if it works. Mm-hmm. And I won't go into it here, but they do have a lot in common. It's really quite interesting. And that may be the writer in me that was able to, tease out those little facts. But I'm interested. I consider it a failing. I'm interested in the charismatic megafauna.
Mm-hmm.
And so whales are that. And then owls are like the charismatic megafauna of the bird world.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the owls I studied are quite large. Great grays are, about 2 feet long and, have a wingspan of about 6 feet. So they're quite large. So I'm drawn to the unique and the interesting. And we don't see a lot of owls. We don't know a lot about owls because they live in the dark, really. Mm-hmm. And it's just not a part of the world. If they're easily seen and you can find them easily, we are going to study them. Mm-hmm. But it's more of a challenge. It's more of a challenge to study whales way out in the ocean, and it's harder to find owls, so they're harder to study.
And one of the things I really took notice to in the book is that a lot of the people that you're out there finding owls, capturing owls, banding them, this is a lot of citizen science. These aren't people with PhDs most of the time running out there doing all this studying. It's very passionate people, which I think can be a great thing because that's where a lot of great discoveries over time have come from, is just really passionate people. Before there was official scientists and PhD program, people were just out there learning about stuff that interested them. And that seems like a unique experience. There are a lot of characters out there that you met along the way. So do they have any sort of, defining characteristics of these people? I know you several throughout the book, but what drives them to study specifically owls? They don't just go out and study other things. It's just owls.
That's interesting. I do find, talking to different biologists, that there is usually a characteristic that draws people to a certain species. Mm-hmm. I met bear people that just kind of seemed like bears, and whale people, I don't know. It's just, yeah, that's interesting. And what is it about owls? I think the first guy I met, Jamie Ocker, who lives very near me, he's a very quiet person and very kind of definitely an introvert. So that's probably a lot of the things that draws people to owls. You can be out there in the woods by yourself in the middle of the night, nobody bothering you.
I can relate to that. That's a feeling I strive for as well. One of the interesting points that I remember, in reading the book, was that there is a lot of talk about how climate change is affecting the lives of owls. I mean, you don't really hear about how their populations have declined in certain areas a lot. I mean, especially where I'm at. I mean, I've never heard of anything like that. And it all boils down to basic conservation principles. The food that they eat is not coming up at the right time of the year, whether it's bugs or mice or whatever. They're not reproducing regularly at the same times they always have been. How have you noticed that? Has anything changed since you've written the book, or are we still kind of on this downward spiral? And what steps do we need to take from a conservation angle to make sure that these animals don't disappear? Because owls are lovable for everyone, even if they don't know anything about the outdoors. They're just everybody knows owls.
They really do. People really do love owls. It's amazing to me, the number of owl knickknacks and stuff around in the world. You see owls everywhere. And so they really are in our consciousness. And there are a lot of things that impact the lives of owls. I think climate change is just one of them. Overdevelopment is another. Which probably is the main one. I mean, I think about burrowing owls that live in the ground. They dig holes, or they use badger holes. Mm-hmm. Out here in the West, they use badger holes. In Florida, they dig their own holes because it's kind of sandy. But the ones out here, it's too hard for them to dig themselves. They're very small. But the ranchers don't like the badgers because they dig holes and their cows will step in them and break their leg, and they don't like that. And I can understand that. And I feel like we need to learn to live with all wildlife. So
Yes.
That's probably the main thing, is learn all we can. You said, what steps can we take? I think the more we know, the more we can make choices. And we may have to argue back and forth. Some people don't like stuff, like out here where I am, the wolves coming back is a huge deal. Still, people poison them, and it's just like, oh my God. That for me, I take offense to that. So, there's a lot of different things, but just learning all we can.
And that's one thing I like to get across in my show specifically too, is like, I don't really particularly care what people do to become like excited about the outdoors. Like if you want to go fishing, if you want to get into snowboarding, if you want to get into backpacking, kayaking, anything, because I feel like once these people learn to have an appreciation for X thing, whatever they're passionate about, that's going to translate down the road into conservation. And like, I think that is a key across, like, it doesn't have to be just scientists and naturalists saying you need to take these steps. Like I grew up in the outdoors. My dad, his dream was to buy this wooded property, and we lived out there. We heated our house with wood. We did all this stuff. But as I got older and started getting into more like strenuous outdoor activities, through hiking, the AT, and doing all this stuff, that's where my love of conservation came from. Like I realized, like, if this isn't here, how can I have fun? And then that grew into a love of wildlife and all of this stuff. So I'm really on board with you saying just learning, knowing that these problems exist is a huge key factor to getting people excited about conservation, which can really be hard. And conversely, I think one of my favorite points that you brought up is like, it's okay, or what was the exact sentiment you said? It's like, don't be upset for being a human, I think, or don't be mad at yourself for being human, because we get so caught up in the minutia of our lives. Like sometimes you buy a bottle of water and you're like, oh, I'm such a terrible person, but like, we're human beings. We all make mistakes. So what do you mean? Is like, there more behind that statement? Because that really stood out to me as someone who loves the outdoors. Like, okay, don't be mad at yourself for just being a human being, because that's what you are.
That actually is I think it's the prologue for my whale book, The Breath of a Whale. And that statement was communicated to me from a dolphin. And I know that sounds crazy. I know that sounds impossible. And as a scientist, it took me 20 years to kind of come to grips with that statement, to come to some kind of, that was a communication from a dolphin. But there are animal communicators. I've taken animal communication classes, and it's a real thing. I mean, we could verify, by talking to a pet owner and talking to pets, we verified the information that each of us got. Like, what is their favorite toy? What color is their food bowl? Where do they sleep? Things that people know. And so I got the information from these animals. It was just like having a conversation with a human. And I think we can all do that. But this statement just happened to come from a dolphin. I was swimming in the water, and this mother and calf approached me, and she swam in a circle around me with the calf in between us. And so I knew that she was comfortable with me, because if she wasn't, she would have kept the calf on the other side of her, or she wouldn't have approached me at all. Mm-hmm. And I was feeling extremely guilty, because at that time I was watching the U.S. Navy testing their low frequency active sonar, which is a really loud sound that they blast into the water, and it disturbs the ocean, the wildlife in the ocean, especially whales and dolphins. They have hearing frequencies that are different than ours. And so it was really bothering them. And I was feeling guilty. And so I was apologizing for that. And she said to me, as much as you're talking to me now, don't feel guilty for being a human. You are the guardians. And I was blown away, because that was not a thought that I could have had in my head. I really felt bad for even breathing at that point in my life. And yeah, if anything's going to change, it's going to be us that changes it. And that's, I think, what she meant.
Yeah, and you did that part in the book is actually something I really wanted to talk about when you're studying the frequencies and how it's affecting whales. Like, there's so much stuff I never knew. I mean, I'm landlocked here in Ohio, basically. I mean, I got the Great Lakes, but we don't have whales, obviously. But it's just so interesting how that it's essentially killing a lot of like whales occasionally, at least at the time, because it like screws up. I'm not sure the correct way of putting this, but like it screws up like mothers and infants and how they're communicating with each other, and they're getting lost and stuff. And that was super sad when I was reading that. I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe this. So is that something like they're still are they still using this like low frequency sonar stuff, or is it sort of banned or more regulated than back when you were studying it? Because I know there was some controversy, like everyone's like, yeah, whatever, and it made you quit science for a while. Essentially, is what ended up happening. So, has there been any changes with that, or is that still something?
I know it's something they're still testing, at least just a few years ago. Now, what's happened in the last couple of years, everything is, with COVID, it's just, I don't know.
Absolutely.
So I don't know what they're doing now, but they were still testing it. And they had some really respected scientists who were sort of opposed to the project looking into it. So I don't know if they were finding, something different than the original ones, which I felt was kind of just greenwashed. And I know they still, well, it's not still, they are now wanting to put 5G into the water. So I don't know if you know anything about the 5G frequencies. Right now, the airplanes are trying to keep them from, the airlines are trying to keep them from putting 5G out because it messes with their, so if it messes with the airline, equipment, then what's it going to do to a whale that depend on sound and depend on, they have sound for everything. It's their life. Like they can't see very far. They don't depend on sight to find their food. So
that has to be so interesting. Like hasn't it changed the way that they travel and meet up now too, because they're traveling to like quieter places around the world so that like whales can actually communicate in unpolluted water? Because I believe they used to be able to communicate over like hundreds and hundreds of miles in the ocean just by hearing each other. But now, I mean, there's boats continuously. There's like oil rigs out in the middle of the ocean. All this stuff is interfering with that. So, has it actually changed like how they're migrating and moving to places?
Somewhat, especially blue whales off they couldn't find blue whales for a long time. I went all around the world looking for blue whales and I couldn't find them. And then they found a population off of California. And I think what happened was they were drilling for oil off Santa Barbara. And I think that noise scared them away. That's a big feeding ground for them. And I think they just didn't go there anymore. They went to other places looking for food that was quieter. So yeah, it is changing their migrations. Then they stopped drilling for, oil off California, and the whales came back. And they're still there. And it's quite a large population off of California. So it does have an impact on them. Just how much of an impact, I don't think we know that yet. There are sperm whales running around in the ocean that are deaf. They've been able to figure that out in areas over in Europe where they're testing the drilling places. They can test the whales and see if they respond to sound. That's probably not a good thing for a sperm whale. Although, maybe because they send out a pulse through their head, their melon, and then it comes back to them through their jaw. So it may just be that they're working on vibrations. Here's the thing. We're humans. We're very ingenious. We can come up with different ways of powering things than oil. Mm-hmm. If we really want to do that, we can do that. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I'm talking about we just make different choices. There's no use to feel guilty about it because what good does that do? It's a waste of energy. So if we just think, okay, we don't want to use oil anymore, let's figure out something else. I know magnetics is a huge thing that they're talking about now, as far as powering different things, making batteries out of that. And
Yeah,
so,
it is one of those things that I totally agree with. Like, we definitely have the capability to make these things more sustainable and more, you know, like less harmful to wildlife, but that's like the human condition. All we care about is ourselves. And like, even people like who know better often still make choices like occasionally that are still very self-centered, because it's like that's humans. That's like our thing. We haven't learned our history from back in Mesopotamia, Rome, Greece, all these time periods. We look back like, what are these people thinking? And then we're still doing the same thing, just on a grander scale. It's the human condition, but like you said, that's what we are. And I would love to see that change. And I personally, I'm just a guy from Ohio. I don't have a grand solution, but I think it really does kind of revolve around all of us who have voices in the outdoors communities, like saying these things. Like, I feel like a lot of people are scared to even touch on this topic, because even conservation's become highly politicized in like the climate nowadays. It's like, you realize if there's none of the, like, if all the whales die, if all the owls die, if all the creatures you love that aren't your dogs and cats die, like, we will die. They're like the human population. We're all part of this global thing. I was just watching some Disney documentary last night. It was like basically saying the astronauts, they're interviewing them, they're like, you guys really need to like take a step back and chill, because like we're all gonna kill each other if we don't take this stuff a little more seriously. And I don't know how, like, do you have any ideas on what we can do to like make people more aware of conservation, other than just a word, or greenwashing, or whatever, all these stuff that companies are doing nowadays, and making it really sink into people's minds?
well, you do have a grand solution. You're doing it. You're getting out into the forest. You're learning all you can about different species. You're learning about the earth. You're talking to people. You're putting a podcast out. That's what, I mean, for me, I know it gets really frustrating because it's one person at a time, but
Yes.
that's what it is. That's what it takes. It's raising our consciousness, each of us, and being aware of what is around us. What is going on in my neighborhood? Are my neighbors cutting down their trees that the owls used to sit in? Can I talk to my neighbors about maybe not cutting that specific tree? Or, it's one person at a time, one species at a time, and we will get there. And it's as simple as that. And, I think it was E.O. Wilson who said, we will protect what we love. I'm pretty sure it was him. It could have been somebody else, but we'll protect what we love. And so fall in love with something. Fall in love with an owl or a whale, and learn all you can. I read a really great book about jellyfish. This woman wrote a book about jellyfish. It was fascinating. And I would have thought before I read that book, jellyfish, who cares? But they're a huge, they have an impact on us here on land. And because they can clog up all these power plants that are on the coast, they can get in the seawater and clog it up and cause a whole thing. So, you just never know.
Yeah, and it is really interesting. It was the same documentary I was just talking about. I don't think it's a series. It was like narrated by Will Smith. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it just all is big picture. And they're talking about how we continually talk about how the Amazon rainforest is the lungs of the earth and this and that. And obviously it's very important to take care of our remaining forests, even here in the United States. But they were saying essentially all the oxygen that's being created in the rainforest isn't really leaving the rainforest. All of the oxygen that we're all breathing on Earth is coming from the ocean, which is counterintuitive to what we're all taught as kids. But they're saying these little tiny, I can't remember the names. You'd probably know better than me. They're like these microscopic things that are like made out of silica, essentially from falling sand into the ocean. And they use it as like a shell, or creating all the, like 90% of the oxygen we're all breathing on Earth. They made these huge connections between the sands from the Saharas blowing into the Amazon. That's what's giving the nutrients for all these plants to grow. It was mind blowing. I was like, I can't believe this right now. And it's stuff like that's important too. I mean, I think just understanding everything in the world has impact something else. Like every little thing, like the owls are important, the fish are important, the squirrels are important. It's all important, but we just need to like realize that as a species. So it's a lot. It's a lot, and it's overwhelming a lot of the time, I think, for especially for people like us who this is our whole life revolves around these creatures. So, but interesting. I tend to go all over the place. I'm sorry, but you made a point in your book about owls, and there's this weird connection to aliens and all this stuff. And I think you probably talked to some guy when you were writing the book. I can't remember the exact circumstance, but you said owls are linked to aliens in some way. And growing up, one of my favorite movies was called The Fourth Kind. And all I remember was this big white owl, and I think it was based up in the Pacific Northwest too. I think it was a barn owl they had in that movie. And I don't know, what is this weird connection? Because I heard that, I was like, oh, I got to ask about that. I'm just a sci-fi nerd. I love alien and Bigfoot movies and all that stuff.
Yeah. The world is just so big, and we're so, like you say, we're human centric. Mm-hmm. So we don't really pay attention to what all is out there. We have no idea what's out there. And so would it be so unbelievable to think that there might be aliens here on the planet with us? I mean, it's not that big of a stretch. They could be in the ocean. They could be, in the deep forests. So there is the guy, McClellan, I forget his first name, who has studied the link between owls and people who have alien contact around owls. Like an owl will fly over their head and they'll look up and there's a spaceship in the air or whatever they see. He's written a whole book on it. It's kind of he's interviewed all these people. Mm-hmm. So there is something going on there. What it is, I can't say. But it is an interesting intro into thinking about what could be here with us on this planet. Yeah. I don't think we're the only ones here. I don't even think we're in charge. I think, the planet has her own ideas about life and how it works. And
that's something that I iterate to people occasionally is like we always think we're so important, but like when it comes down to it, there has been mass extinctions on a global scale of dinosaurs and like all life on Earth at multiple points throughout like prehistoric history. So like the Earth will be fine. It will just kind of reset itself in some fashion. It'll find microbes that'll turn all our plastic garbage into stuff. But like, to me, that's also like defeatist. Like, that's not the point. Like, we should still be trying to take as good of care as we can. Like, all these animals and even people on the Earth are suffering because of just really lazy decisions that we're making as human beings. So one of the points I really found interesting to me, because barred owls here in Ohio and like the Midwest, they're just like fairly common owls. They're just like, if you were going to see an owl, you're going to see like a great horned owl or a barred owl. But apparently they're a big problem in the Pacific Northwest. And that was kind of mind blowing to me. How are they, to the listeners and people who haven't read your book yet, how is that impacting the owls up where you live now? Because that just kind of blew my mind that they were almost like a nuisance animal or considered invasive to some degree.
I will answer that question. I just wanted to make one point about our previous topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we are still here, even when the dinosaurs, they were killed, they were wiped out, whatever. The gratitude and the appreciation that we can feel for every day that we wake up on this beautiful planet. It really is. I think it is extremely unique in the universe. Even in our solar system, there's not another planet like it. The blue oceans, the green trees, it's something sacred. And the more we can appreciate her and love her and really tune into the fact that she gives us life every day, I think if we can come from that place, we'll make different choices. We don't need the guilt we feel, just put it down, move on, and do the right thing. I mean, it's, and with that said, it does tie into the barred owls and how they are sort of considered an invasive species here because they didn't grow up here, they moved. And now this is interesting to me. It's not clear if they came across on the forests that were planted in areas where they're not, like, I think it's in the Dakotas or something. The government had people plant stands of trees to like secure their land claim back in the 1800s. And so that gave barred owls a place to sort of, it's like stepping stones. They get up from forest to forest.
Yep.
Or did they come across Canada in the boreal forests and come down that way? We're not sure what they did. Maybe they did both. But they are here now. They thrive much better in clear cuts. Spotted owls, who they compete with, their cousins, close cousins, can't really function in clear cuts. They're very old growth. They're very particular about what they eat. They go for the flying squirrels, who are feeding on mushrooms in the soil and that kind of thing. So it's a very small window for the spotted owls. And the barred owls are just very good at living anywhere, eating anything. One researcher that I talked to watched a barred owl eating crawfish out of a stream. So, they'll eat anything. They're just really good at what they do. And as humans we are really good at what we do. And so if we're not careful, we can take over everything. And it's just a matter of perspective, really.
Yes. That I think that can go for everything. It's all a matter of perspective. And I like a lot of the wording you're using is like a lot of the things that we're doing are a choice, and like we can choose to do the right thing and make a positive impact, or we can just feel sorry and bad and do nothing. So I think that's a great mindset. I talk about that all the time on a lot of the stuff I do. Is like a lot of this stuff is a mindset to just putting yourself in a position to really like try and make a difference. You might impact one person in your whole life. You might impact a million people. It is what it is. But if you at least give it a shot, it's totally worth it in the end. And back to the barred owls, I think about this a lot, and I think too much sometimes. But you're saying, like, what if there in reference to like there's a program to remove, or there was a program to remove the barred owls in certain areas to see how it impacted the native populations of owls. You're like saying, what if we're removing the wrong thread? Like, what if this is happening like the way it's supposed to happen? Which I think we as humans like control. We like to control the environment. We like to control every little aspect of our lives. And I've thought about this a lot. Like, we're always talking about human impact, but we are a product of biological evolution. So like how are we not sure that what we're doing isn't the path that it's supposed to be on? But at the same time, it's like we're literally destroying everything. And then I'm like getting to this whole, am I overthinking this? Getting like defeatist to the point of conversation. I don't know. I don't know if you have any like reflections or thoughts on that, but that my mind goes there sometimes. Like maybe this is the way things are supposed to be happening, because like to me there's no end goal. Like evolution in the earth is just happens how it happens. Like dinosaurs didn't choose to like get wiped out, or dinosaurs didn't choose to evolve, or whales or anything. We're just here doing whatever we're doing. So I don't know, that might be a little little off topic, I'm not sure.
No, I think about this a lot actually, and I feel like the earth is a school, and we are invited here to learn lessons like you would in school. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the biggest lessons for us to learn, and that we are learning at this point, even though it might not seem like it at the moment, is how to care about each other, how to get along, how to settle our differences and just move on, and how to care for the planet, how to care for each other. Mm-hmm. Learn about who's living here with us. And I think that's, a level of consciousness that we're at right now is kind of child consciousness. Like you see little kids on the playground or whatever, playing, they're fighting over, whose toy is it? I know it's mine. No, they fight over it. And that's sort of where we're at. Mm-hmm. But we are moving beyond that. We have to. There's too many of us living here now to continue this fighting, whether it's, this whole host of things right now that we're fighting about. And it's really, if you stop to think about it, does any of it really matter in the scheme of things? I don't think it does. What matters is how are we going to live here together? All of us, whatever species are here with us, how do we learn to live together? And I think it's that simple. And we make it like all,
It can be very convoluted. I mean, there's people who spent their whole lives. You've got like you've said, like E.O. Wilson, and you've got philosophers, you've got Alan Watt, all these people, all the way back to like the Stoics back in Greece. Like they're just continually saying the same thing over and over again, basically. Like, if you can, mind your own business, don't be a jerk. And here we are. We're still just kind of, like you said, in this childlike conscious state of just continually bickering about stuff that really doesn't even matter in the end. Like we're going to come and go. We're just here for a brief period. And I think like we miss the point a lot of the time of like, hey, like, and I think this to myself all the time, like, you're going to die. You might be dead tomorrow. You might have 50 years left. You don't know. So you might as well do the best you can with the time you got. I mean, we're not all going to be the next like president of the United States or Will Smith. There's like all these, it doesn't matter. Like none of that matters. It's like doing the best we can and trying to do the right thing, I think is super important. And I feel like I want to get that message to not only like kids, but like people my age and like even people who are older, like trying to get my parents' generation to this mindset is a little tougher than someone who's like my cousin who's like 18. She's like, oh yeah, conservation. Heck yeah. I'm totally all about that. But like my grandparents, not so much. So, do you have any suggestions on maybe to people who, want to come up and maybe follow a similar path to you, like to become a scientist, an author that really can have a wider reach than just, someone who is a general outdoors enthusiast, like what they can do to maybe spark a conservation ethic in their friends, family, like you said, one person at a time. Like what are some little things that they can do day in, day out?
Well, I started, as we started this conversation, as a kid from Ohio. I didn't write. I wasn't a writer. It was my love of whales that sort of hit me in the head saying, I could probably reach more people than these 30 people here on the boat with me. I was a naturalist on a whale watch boat. Yep. And I did that a lot and day after day. And I thought I could reach more people if I actually put this down. And so I took a writing class and I learned how to write. Anybody can do it. If I can do it, anybody can. Or they pick up a microphone and become a podcaster or put out videos, become a filmmaker, anything, just reach people. find a species that you love and learn all about it. Start there. I mean, I started with whales, and it's cascaded down, owls, wolves, whatever is out there. And now I'm just like fascinated by everything. And I've translated that to humans. I mean, it's all connected. Everything has a piece of the puzzle. It's like a big puzzle, and we all have a little piece. And just focus on it in that way. And if it leads you into a science career, great, do that. Start as a citizen scientist. And if it's required that you go and get a degree somewhere, then find a good place to do that. Pick up the trash in your neighborhood. There seems to be a lot more of it since these last couple years. I'm not sure why that is, but, do that. Realize that plastics are harmful to the environment if put into the ocean, and they just, it's all connected. So what's in Ohio may sweep into the Great Lakes, out into the Atlantic Ocean. It's not going to go away. We've got to start picking it up. So there's lots of little things that people can do on a day-to-day basis. And most of all, though, I would say check in daily. And this is a good lesson for me too. I don't do this, but it's a good thing to do. Check in daily and be grateful for this planet that we live on. It's beautiful. The beings that live here with us are fantastic. Even if that being is Sasquatch.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that, because you had mentioned it right before we got started. You said, I checked out a couple of your episodes, and I'm thinking probably the Sasquatch ones. That's the first one everybody watches. So, you said you're mildly interested in that topic. How did you stumble upon that? Because, like, weirdly enough, Ohio again, everybody thinks that like the Pacific Northwest where you're at is Bigfoot country. But I mean, all of the reported sightings of Bigfoot are like a ton of them are here in Ohio. So again, weird Ohio connection to everything. I don't know what it's all about, but where does your interest in this stem from besides just living in the Pacific Northwest where it's like, hey, my dog's outside and there's Bigfoot,
If it's possible to go a little farther out on the limb with this topic than just talking about Sasquatch, I'm sort of in the camp of psychic Sasquatch, as far as I think they can be anywhere at any time that they want to be. I think they're multidimensional. I think people do see them. I know people that have seen tracks of them, and they're sort of related to owls. I think that's
I have heard that, yes.
The last chapter of the book is the great gray owls.
Mm-hmm.
And Andy Huber, the guy whose property I was on to look at the great gray owls, is very much into Sasquatch, and he's got a lot of friends that are into Sasquatch. And so I think that's where it really started piquing for me, my interest. I don't know why I have interest in, I'm interested in aliens. I don't know. It's all life. It's life. Life is interesting. Yeah, it's a huge topic. I find it very interesting that I didn't know they were in Ohio, but It doesn't surprise me. Like I said, I think they can be anywhere. And I think they're here to help us. They're here to help us learn about them, learn about, have the idea that we all live here together. I mean, I think it's a huge topic, and it's quite interesting. And
people love it. It's a good mystery. It's one of those things like everybody wants it to be real so badly. Like I remember growing up on just Bigfoot TV shows. The exact ones I'm talking about, with like the cheesy, really dramatic music, people just with flashlights out in the woods. Like I grew up on those. So it's always going to be a topic of interest to me. But like you're out there in Bigfoot Central. Do we have a Bigfoot book coming? What's next on the agenda?
I would like to have a Bigfoot book coming, that is for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet. But like I said, I don't think we're alone on this planet. And I think Bigfoot is, they're almost like a introductory species because they not that they look like us, but they're not far from us. It's almost like, one of the theories is that, they're just a step that in the hominid, evolutionary line that just didn't get wiped out or something. So maybe, they're here to help us make that connection that we are part of the galactic, I don't know, species puzzle. I don't know how to say that, but
yeah, it really does get really interesting when you start thinking about how essentially all life on Earth is literally in a very literal form. I mean, we are just pieces of the universe from some crazy gigantic explosion billions and billions of years ago reassembled, and like now I'm talking to you right now, stream of consciousness, like we're understanding what we're saying. You're literally probably a few thousand miles away on the other side of the country, and like everything that we're seeing in front of us and everything is like arranged particles that have some consciousness come together. It is, if you sit in bed and think about it at night, sometimes you'll like lose your mind. And that's a good, it might sound strange coming from me because like I just look like this big redneck dude from Cornfield, Ohio. But if you ever get really stressed out or like we're like I get stressed out about conservation and the way things go in the world, and like just being in this community in the field, like I don't just talk hiking and this and that. Like I talk to everyone, hunters, fishermen, conservationists, extreme sports people, like there's so much stuff going on in the world that I worry about. And then I think, oh, well, if I have this mental thing where I lay in bed and I will zoom out from like my bed to the top of my house to Ohio to the United States to outside the Earth, outside. It's like you see these images of the galaxy and stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, absolutely none of this matters right now. And then I just kind of calm down. I'm able to go to bed then. So I would agree that everything is connected in some weird way. Do I claim to know what that way is? Absolutely not. I'm just have no clue. I usually just am talking in real time and making stuff up. But, I always like to ask before I close the show first, if there's anything that you'd like to get out to people that's maybe not something that we've talked about already, like conservation, anything, like any message that you could give to people on how to do whatever, make their life better, make the world a better place. I know you've already touched on it a few times, but is there any like endearing message you'd like to give to my listeners specifically? Because I don't know how many are listening right now, but there's probably a couple.
Well, you sort of touched on it there. I think for me, learning to trust that the universe is conspiring for me, that there is a greater plan in life. I'm a deeply spiritual person. I wouldn't say I'm religious in any way, but I'm deeply spiritual. And I believe that. I believe that we are on this evolutionary process to live on this planet in peace, all together, abundance, joy. I totally believe in that. And I think we're on the real brink of that. Whatever's happening now, from a spiritual point of view, there is light coming onto the planet. Spiritual light from the universe, whatever it is, it's coming onto the planet. It's illuminating the shadows, which is why everything is crazy. And wherever there's light, there can't be darkness. I believe that deeply. And that's the thing that keeps me going, because if I look at the 3D world, it doesn't look real good right now. But we're on the precipice of taking this leap into this greater world that we can all share together. And it just takes a few of us learning to get along, putting all our differences aside and realizing they really don't matter, and just loving being here on this planet.
I absolutely agree with everything you're saying. Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of everyone just kind of learning. You don't have to like everyone; just get along and just accept your differences and move along with that. And before we go here, I just like to, as an author, I know there's this gigantic website that sells everything that the whole world buys their stuff from, but often it's better for them to buy from a different place because that gives you more money and more control over where that money's going. So where can people, I don't want to mess this up, so I'm going to read it. Where can people get The Breath of a Whale, The Science and Spirit of Pacific Ocean Giants, and The Hidden Lives of Owls, The Science and Spirit of Nature's Most Elusive Birds, which was on the New York Times bestseller list? Congratulations. Huge.
Thank
huge.
you.
Where can they get this that will benefit you the best?
Well, I hate to say it, but anyway, the easiest place is that who shall not be mentioned, but anywhere you buy it, anywhere you can find it, Barnes and Noble, a lot of places can order. The best place is your local independent bookstore because they're all connected, and those are small business people just trying to get by. Mm-hmm. So that's the best place to buy it.
Absolutely, and
that'd be great.
I personally recommend these books. Like I wouldn't just invite random people on my podcast. Like I preach this a lot, and sometimes it's hard to live that. Is I don't just invite people on because I want to get the most eyes on this because they have a name and they've written I recommend stuff that I firmly believe in, and both your books, the way they're written, the storytelling, it's not just hard facts, which I think a lot of people have a hard time relating to. They're just reading science. They're I don't understand this. This is boring. And you were able to make it very understandable, the science behind this, without making it complex and difficult to read. And I need that personally because I'm not a scientist. but Leigh, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your awesome stories with me, science, and I appreciate that, and I hope we can talk again someday.
That would be really fun. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really a delightful conversation. Thank you.